Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast. Today we got a great show. We're going to be talking about your silver bullet. And what do I keep saying is your silver bullet? It's you, your formula, your process, your system, what you have developed as a salesperson. That's your silver bullet. And the more I learn from great salespeople is some of them know it. Some have been brave enough to, very few, to document it, and even fewer to share it with other people. Now, I always looked at it as kind of a meta thing. I don't look at my system or how I sell unless you're selling to the same type of people. What you want to do is come up with your own, but it has similar elements, similar steps, because we're selling to people. And today we've got a medical equipment salesperson turned sales author turned entrepreneur. And we're going to go through his story, his superpowers. And what you're going to start to find this year is a consistency of these great salespeople is that they not only have developed a system, but they put it down on paper. These are the people I want to share with you this year because this is the differentiator between the A and the B player. Because if you don't put it down on paper or on the computer somewhere outside of your head where you can analyze it, where you can look at it, where you can test it, where you can play with it, modify things and change things and what if things, then you become great at sales. You become a great performer. So we're going to get into all the elements of it today. And I think you're really going to enjoy it. And this is what I do in the training classes is I help people develop their silver bullet system. And I've seen that it has very consistent elements, whether it's getting a meeting, asking questions. Did I tell you the questions course gets thrown in? If you order by February 28th, free course, $500 value is thrown in if you order either start the conversation, get the meeting, or closing the complex sale. The coupon code is in the office hours, so make sure you check that out. Make sure you do not hit submit if the balance is above zero because you will be charged for that. Get the coupon code and it'll be free if you order in February. Also, want to make sure you're checking out Co-Video. Video email is the way to break through this year. It is insanely powerful. I've asked them to put up more videos on YouTube. I'm sharing videos on the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast company page daily. So make sure you're seeing them. Also, Pipedrive, you can try it for a month free with the Brutal Truth coupon code. Make sure you're checking that out. It's enterprise quality now, insanely powerful. My team is using it. And it connects up with your email, your calendar. It auto-corrects all the company information. All of it's integrated and it's so beautiful and simple. You put your system in there and you just execute against it. Let's get my guest on. I think you're really going to enjoy this interview. I'm taking all of these elements and putting them into the Year of Excellence course, which is included this year with the Closing the Complex Sale course. So check everything out at b2brevenue.com, and let's get into the interview. Hey, Brian, thanks for joining us today as a way of getting started. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I've been in the sales and marketing world for 20 plus years. I was fortunate to land a job out of college with Coca-Cola USA, the fountain division. Kind of cut my teeth in sales there for several years and then left that company and went to work for Johnson & Johnson. And I was in 4 different divisions there, 3 of which were startups, primarily focused on the operating room and surgeon interaction. And then a friend of mine approached me after being with J&J for about 13 years and said he had a company he was interested in starting, asked if I would like to join him. And after about 4 months of serious consideration, jumped out of corporate America into that and thought I knew how to sell, had awards and whatnot to supposedly show it. But when I made that transition and jumped into entrepreneurialism, it was a cold, hard slap in the face and probably the hardest transition I ever made. And in order to really sell the way I needed to, I had to create a process that worked reliably in person or over the phone. And that was codified in the book I just completed about a year ago called The Selling Formula.
And what was the motivation to write the book? Was it just documenting your experience, or was it a career aspiration?
It was really became more of a documentation of my experience. I do quite a bit of journaling and was just writing some things down with respect to an overview of how I've sold. And these key components kept coming up over and over, and I thought, this is a very duplicatable process. So if I could put this into a book, I think it would help a lot of salespeople look at their process and maybe compare to what I have and give them an opportunity to maybe streamline some things or make them more effective. And that was the motivation behind it.
Okay. And I like that, because when people say, or they focus solely on mindset or personality or philosophy, I'm like, you're playing a game and you don't even know what game you're playing. I mean, the process is the game, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what were some of those elements that really stuck out for you?
There's 5.
No. Just the one.
Okay. Well, this will be a short conversation. I can tell you what the key element is, though, Brian. After looking at the whole sales process, I asked myself, what's the all-important critical component? And it boiled down to this. The key to life is the questions you ask.
Yeah.
I'm not just saying in selling, but honestly, I have a sincere belief the key to life and relationships is the questions you ask. Because I discovered if you can change one question, you could literally change your entire outcome.
And it is the only mind control that we have over ourselves or over others.
That's well said. Yeah.
And it's a big part of pretty much every successful salesperson I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you make a statement, people become defensive about it. They try and pull it apart. They try and understand what it means. But if you ask them a question, they have to conjure up some kind of answer.
Yes. Yeah, it really causes them to think through what you're saying.
Now, how deep did you get into questions?
Real deep. In the book, I talk about the process I followed to build out questions. And may I share a story about how that worked for me in Johnson & Johnson?
Yeah.
I was, at the time, working for a division called Ethicon Endosurgery, and we sold devices for laparoscopy in the operating room. Video cameras in the abdomen, and the surgeons were doing procedures that way. And we had a device to help repair a hernia. And our competitor was very entrenched in this space. And I was getting very frustrated with the results I was getting. Our device we knew was superior to our competitors, but you can't just walk up to a surgeon and say, hey, our device is superior, you need to start using it.
Right.
That wouldn't go very well.
Because that's what they expect you to say.
Right.
It has no meaning. Yeah.
No meaning. So I took hours and started to craft questions, and it was just a 3-part approach. I looked at the features of our product, and then I spun out the benefits related to each feature, and then from there it spun out multiple questions. And then I just kind of flipped it and did an 80-20 approach. What were the top 20% key questions? And put those in order and started testing it. Lo and behold, my evaluation started to double. And it really started working. And I kept honing the questions, and it got better and better. And my sales doubled on the device. Well, the word got out into the sales force about this question list. And I started passing it on to people that were requesting it. And they experienced the identical results if they followed the questions in order.
Yeah.
So that was a magical moment to see that actually happen.
And that built into your process, because you probably went from a pitch-oriented rep, talking about who you are and what you do and what your product does, to focusing on the problem that your product solves and the implications of that for the patient and the doctor.
Exactly.
Boom.
Yeah, you got it.
And that's a tough style thing to change, though, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
It was. We were taught and trained very well to focus on clinical outcomes. Well, to bridge that gap, you've got to ask the right questions that tie back to those outcomes,
Yes.
as opposed to what you just stated. Yes.
Otherwise, you're assuming that the doctor can make that bridge, but has no motivation to.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's a key word you're using, motivation.
Right. Yeah. It's our job to sell. It's not their job to buy.
That's right.
We forget that part sometimes.
Yeah, we do. Just, why aren't you motivated? Well, why didn't you ask the right questions?
Yeah. And so number one is questions, clearly, right?
Well, the first of the 5 steps, I'll give those to you, are connect and set agenda.
Okay.
Second is the interview / questions. Third is present your solution. Fourth is pricing and guarantees. And fifth is closing.
Okay. And were most of your sales that one call type close where there was that single decision maker, that doctor or surgical head?
Typically, it would be multiple closes because in order to gain momentum to switch a device out, you've got to have multiple surgeons requesting it.
Okay.
Some of them have the power to make a decision unilaterally because of the amount of surgeries they do and the revenue it brings into the hospital. But most of them, it would require multiple sales.
And the hospital's paying for it, not the surgeon.
That's correct. Yeah, they bring it into stock and hold it.
Yeah, so it is a complex sale. It's not a simple sale.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, do any of your 5 go outside of that interaction?
Yes, it's more of a framework.
Okay.
And it's not hard and fast, but for the most part, this is a process that tends to work in just about every type of sales call. Now, there's going to be outliers on everything, of course.
And have you seen other people be able to adapt to it, or was it kind of unique to your style or personality?
I have seen others adapt to it. One of the things I mention in the book is just this mystery of having worked for top corporations. I've never saw one corporation take their top 2 or 3 salespeople and record their presentation, send it out to the field sales force and say, listen to this 20, 30, 40 times and adopt the process. Don't throw away your personality, but adopt the concept, the process, keywords, and watch what happens. I did that with one of our associates. He took one of the recordings I did of a presentation, and he listened to it about 50 times, he told me, when he was driving. And he doubled his sales and became Salesman of the Year. So, yeah, it works.
That's kind of one of the paradoxes I see in this profession, because too often there's 2 types of people out there doing training, people who've had like 2 to 3 years success, which may or not be attributed to them, and those who are in their 50s who have had, maybe 30 years of success, but in a kind of a different thing. And they can't really articulate it the way you have. They kind of say, oh, in this case, do this, and it becomes folklore and war stories, and it's too hard for somebody to patch that into a process.
Totally can relate to that. When I started in sales, there were these grizzled veterans with Coca-Cola that everybody worshipped, and they just could not articulate what they were doing. And I tried to understand it, but I got very little bit of information teased out of those conversations.
And they're not just being cagey, they're just unconsciously competent.
Exactly.
It's like your grandmother in the kitchen without the cookbook. They're making this lasagna, and you try and ask them questions. It's like, no, you just put this here and this there. Well, when you do it for 30 years, and it's your passion.
Right. A pinch and a dash mean different things to different people, right?
Yeah. And they can tell just the right timing and all of these little elements that people look at it and they think, oh, they're hiding their secret from you. Part of it's unconscious competence. Part of it's just they've honed that skill where they know their territory. They know where to spend their time. They know who's real and who's not real and what they care about and how to talk to them. And like your first step about, building up that rapport part to open people up for questions, because you just can't launch into questions without a little bit of rapport.
Mm-hmm. And that, to your point, that was the hardest thing about writing this book, is I'm stuck inside my own bottle and I can't read the writing on my own label.
Yeah.
And so I had to somehow step out as a third party, and I didn't realize how much I had to actually detail out that was just subconscious, as you say. It's competence that you're not aware of.
Yeah, I mean, I'd had a similar experience. I mean, I came from an engineering background, so, the drawing out and the process was kind of ingrained. Mm-hmm. And the other part was I was lazy. All my business was travel, and you had to get up at 4 a.m, stand in security lines. I'm 6'4", get stuffed in a coach seat for 2.5 hours, land, and be at a meeting at 10 a.m. Mm-hmm. And if that meeting wasn't qualified and wasn't prepared for it and didn't go well, that meant that those 6 hours of torture were for naught.
Yes.
So. And a lot of people aren't that, cautious of their time. But if you've made that mistake and go to a place that isn't qualified, or somebody messes up the demo, or the right person isn't there, and you're just like, I went through all of this for nothing.
Mm-hmm. Been there.
Yeah.
Done that. Mm-hmm.
Right, because all your sales were face-to-face, right? The surgeons didn't come to your showroom.
That would be nice, wouldn't it? They're just banging on my door to see the products I have.
Scopes are us, or whatever. Right. So and their time is somewhat valuable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they get time is.
There's a whole construct there, mentally and emotionally, that's been given to them as well.
Yes.
That they exude, right?
Yeah. So you have to hit it right and be ready with those questions in the right sequence and be sensitive to it, because you're not just going to pull one of those questions out magically. Right.
And you're usually doing it at a scrub sink where you've got a captive audience for a few minutes.
Yeah. Hopefully you're not squeamish.
I've seen some interesting things in surgery.
Now, were you a manager as well, where you had to teach this to people?
I was a sales trainer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Not a manager. I actually turned down the manager option because I looked at the lifestyle they led.
Yeah.
And I said, that's not for me.
It's very different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. At least the trainer, you don't have the parental responsibility or the quota responsibility for them.
I like that, parental responsibility.
Right. Like, he's my problem now.
That's right. I've got enough to take care of at home. I don't need 8 more kids.
Oh.
No, I'm saying that with sincere deference to the professionals out there.
Well, we all start somewhere, right? And usually, if we've had any kind of success, we always attribute it to ourselves, and we build up that, what I call the B player complex, where you had some success, you think you were born on third base, and you hit a triple. And you don't realize you just got hit by the ball and somebody carried you to third base.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Right. And,
I'm kidding.
Yeah. And we also tend to think that it is some magical thing that we've been tapped with, our delightful personality and stuff. Mm. But when you start to hit a tough sale, which sounds like a lot of the things that you had, where even though you had the big brand name, you were trying to pull out an incumbent. Mm-hmm. You had a difficult customer who wasn't in any active pain. So
That's right.
You had to activate that. And they were not humble little bumbles. They were, very aloof, very difficult people to get in front of.
I have another story.
Go ahead.
You talk about an incumbent competitor. I'll never forget working with a group of surgeons at a hospital I was trying to replace our competitor in, and I was trying to do a wholesale replacement of our surgical devices. And I had most of the physicians signed off. In fact, all of the key ones had. And what they do is they'll bring a device into surgery, and they'll put it on the table for the surgeon to use. And I was standing outside the operating room, and the physician who signed a paper saying he agreed to convert to our products, he broke scrub. He took off his mask and his scrubs and his gown, and he walked out into the hallway looking for me. And he went right up to my face and started all the expletives you could imagine. Literally, he was 2 inches from my nose, said, "I never gave you permission to come into my operating room, to put your devices on my table, blah, 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 blah." And he said, "I am not going to let you do this." And it was just, he said, "You get everything out of this operating room that you've brought in here. We are not converting to your product." And then he scrubbed back in and finished his procedure. I was devastated. And I said, "Yes, sir." I went and talked to the operating room supervisor who was over all of that activity, and strengthened myself, came back in, revisited, and wound up converting the account. But that moment was sheer terror.
Yeah.
Indelibly etched in my brain, of course.
But that's kind of an element of the complex sale when you are trying to replace an incumbent and you're trying to change the way people are doing business. That you got to get away from who we are and what we do and who you are and what you do to the real problem.
Yes.
Because if there isn't a big enough problem, there isn't going to be enough inertia for real change.
That's absolutely right.
And I think too many people want to stay comfortable. And that's where the no decision. It's like, well, yeah, the decision's no, you just don't want to admit it.
That's right.
You know.
And then we've got this hope list that we're constantly calling.
Yeah.
And they go out 30, 60, 90 days, and it's still on our hope list, so we still think we've got a viable opportunity. Let's be real here. We don't.
Right, because we gave a quote. We did our part. Where's the PO?
Right. That's how sales is supposed to work.
Isn't it? That's what CRM told me.
That's what it did tell you.
Now, how is this applied in your entrepreneurial ventures?
Very similar, actually. With the company I'm with now, Works24, we sell in-lobby digital signage to credit unions and banks all over the country and other entities, and overhead music and messages on hold for the phone system. And so our call points are presidents and CEOs, marketing directors. And the critical piece is, first of all, nobody's looking for this type of service proactively.
Nobody's in market.
Right. Nobody puts anybody on hold on the phone, right? That just doesn't happen, especially at our bank. And so we have to create with questions, very appropriate questions, a need. And once we start going down this path of those questions, it's really almost magical to see the eyes open, the concerns start to come across the face of the prospect or in their voice, and they recognize they're missing hundreds of opportunities to communicate on those short periods of time somebody's on hold, for example.
And I think your case is an ideal case of if you hit them with who you are and what you do, you'd bore them to death.
Oh, they don't care.
They don't care at all. But they have problems. They have dead time that they could use to make money.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know the old marketing adage that if you can enter the conversation going on in your prospect's mind at 2 a.m. with a solution, you should be able to sell them. Well, I can tell you my prospects weren't awake at 2 a.m. wondering what was on hold on their phone system.
No. Well, that's it. And I have a lot of clients that are selling things like this.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of new technology is things like this. And everyone tries to hit them with who they are and what they do. Mm-hmm. And it's just boring, boring, boring. It's like you have to hit them with the problem that you solve.
Yes, and I would add, what we had to do was create some curiosity.
Yes.
By talking about other individuals just like themselves that were using the service. So they say, huh.
Social proof, yeah.
Exactly.
And who have you had the most success with? Is it the marketing people or straight to the president?
You know, ultimately, in terms of making a decision and getting a signed deal, the president.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the most part, the marketing directors are certainly bought into the idea of what we're offering, but the person making the decision is generally the president or board of directors and/or both. And that brings up a whole different dynamic when you've got to convince a board.
And as a seller, what do you consider your superpower? Is it this process? Is it your questioning skills? If there was one thing that, you were hands above everybody else.
I would say the questions.
Yeah. And what type of sequence do you follow?
I start with general questions, really fact-finding, kind of housekeeping questions to keep it comfortable at first. And I will tell my prospect, one of the things that I'm convinced of is if you set an upfront agenda with your prospect, they'll be much more comfortable tracking with you in that process.
Yeah.
And so what I'll tell them as part of the agenda setting process is I'm going to ask you first some housekeeping questions, and then I'd like to talk a little bit more about the things that you're facing with respect to your marketing and how you're doing that, and just get a better understanding of how that works. And really just an overall sense of what I'm trying to portray is curiosity. And people appreciate that you're sincerely curious and interested in their business. And they can tell if you're just doing this by rote.
Yeah,
if it's just a blasé kind of, oh, I got to do this.
Going through a sequence.
Yeah. And so those, starting off general to answer your question, getting more specific, finding out how they do what they do and why they do what they do and who helps them do it. And what does that look like on a day-to-day basis and how much effort do they have to put into it? And then that allows me to craft my responses in a fashion that shows them we have an answer to whatever type of challenge they may be facing based on the feedback they've given me.
And have you found issues with reps who just aren't curious, that want to talk about them and what they do?
Yeah, I've found that, and I've also discovered that it really blows my mind how I'll give individuals a specific 5-step sequence. This is the sequence I've proven works in thousands of interactions, yet they'll still flip a couple things out of sequence and they wonder why they can't close a deal.
Yeah.
And they refuse to change it. And it's very straightforward, but they don't see it that way. That's just, again, a mystery to me.
Maybe they're just going through their own natural feel, or let the customer drive it, or just stimulus response?
I think it's a combination of all three.
Yeah.
And it's tough to be mindful when you've done something for so long. And that's what I think the best salespeople have, is a sincere mindfulness of the prospect and themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen it when they're used to, high transaction sales. Mm-hmm. And then they go into a complex sale. It's usually a disaster because they're trying to close when the deal isn't ready to close.
Yes, I'm laughing because I've seen it so many times. You've gone 30% down the path, and you think it's done.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not done.
Right, and trying to understand what they should be doing between now and when it really does close, they have no idea.
Right.
Right. Because there's rapport there, needs there, desires there, but they have to go talk to the hospital. They have to go through the hospital's capital acquisition process and paperwork and justifications and all the other things that they have to check off to make it a legitimate purchase.
Yes, and then the attendant touch points that nobody told you about that actually bless the deal.
Yeah, and those micro decisions that you may be blind to that could, delay it or kill it.
Absolutely. That's happened.
Cool.
Once or twice.
Now, what would a rep get out of reading your book? What would you hope they get out of it?
My hope is that they'll get one idea out of the book that they can go into their next sales call with and apply and see a change. And I've been told with the feedback I've gotten on this book, that's exactly what people are able to do.
Cool. And where do they get it?
They can go to Amazon. The Selling Formula is the name of the book. And I've also got, for free, your listeners can get a free download of the first 3 chapters of the audiobook just go to BrianRobinsonBook.com, BrianRobinson book.com.
I really enjoy interviews like that because what I hear is people not only getting sales, not only understanding it, not only looking at it from the customer's perspective, but having the foresight and the generosity of documenting it. And it's not that you have to pick up anyone's system. I prefer that you start your own, but some people need to start somewhere. Most people wait till everything is perfect. They think they figured it out completely, and they never document anything. They never prepare for anything. They think they've done it a million times before. They can do it a million times again. And they forget that we're human as salespeople, and we're selling to humans. So guess what? We have to prepare. We have to practice. We have to think through. We have to warm up. Why is this so foreign or so unthinkable in sales or any profession when in other professions it's just normal? Surgeons, lawyers, doctors, accountants, they all warm up. They all have practices. They all kind of some kind of continuing education. It's not that they don't know it. It's that it is a continuum. It is not just binary. It's not on or off. It's like a thermostat. There's several stages and degrees, and we have to warm up like a musician. And if we have a process, even when I was listening to the guest today, I was thinking, I wonder if he really understands the hospital administration business side of the sale, as well as the surgeon user side of the sale. And what we find is that the sale becomes all-encompassing. And if we overlook and forget or trust that one step is going to happen naturally, that's where deals slow down, stall, and die. And what we have to do is anticipate that, because that is the natural flow of a deal. Change is unnatural. Stagnant, staying the same is what would happen naturally unless we push, unless we touch, unless we interact with that organization. And what we got to understand is that surgeon, in this case on this podcast, does not know how to buy. They know what they want. They know what they like, and they would like to tell the hospital what to do. The hospital doesn't want to spend money. The hospital wants to save money. The hospital needs money. Every organization needs money. Now, has your company ever taught you how to spend the company's money other than expense reports? Probably not. Why? Because they don't want you spending money. So this is kind of what I teach in the course. What I do is I take real deals from the people in the course. Let's take it apart. What do you think is going to happen? And people don't want to face what they think is going to happen. But after it happens, they'll say, I kind of knew that was going to happen. And this is part of what sales coaching should be is, okay, what do you think is going to happen? Walk people through those steps. And everybody wants to stay on the comfortable road. They don't want to think or anticipate what can go wrong. And the thing is, the natural thing is for it to go wrong, not to go right. That's what we don't get about sales. We got to think of it as all-encompassing. So get into the course. Make this the year that you really take off. Invest a few dollars a month in you, a few hours of your time in you. Build up your silver bullet. Make this your year to be top dog. Come on. Also, make sure you help spread the word about the brutal truth. Tell one other salesperson about this. Somebody who's money motivated, somebody who wants to succeed in sales, somebody who's unhappy about being number two. I want the people who want to be number one, and whatever that means to you. Thanks for listening. Connect up with me on LinkedIn. Make sure you're telling somebody about this. Check out the YouTube channel. Got 1,000 videos there. You like videos? I got a lot of them. We'll see you.